Today I effed up by forgetting a shift and going to work on mushrooms. I used to be a security guard for one of the larger security companies out there. At the time I was working a public library contract at the main downtown branch. Every now and again there would be special events at the smaller libraries around town that require guard services. One week my boss asked me if I would be interested to work one of the weekend shifts coming up at one of the branches hosting an art gallery. It paid well, and I really just had to stand there. Thiep a day off, daddy needs them dollars. Well, I neglected to write any reminders down on the tiny computer I carry around daily and made some plans of my own for the weekend in question. That Friday I had picked up about 7 grams of mushrooms off my grandpa who grew his own, but instead of just eating them like I normally would have done, I wanted to make them into a tea just to see how the effects differ from ingesting the raw mushroom. Early Saturday morning rolled around, and I unwillingly slinked out of my bed. Mushrooms are pretty much an all-day type of thing, so I like to get the party started before noon. I sit down to engage my daily biological waste expulsion protocols while skimming the mushroom tea instructions briefly. 1. Grind mushrooms. 2. Boil in water. 3. Add tea bag and sugar/honey for sweetness. 4. Strain out mushroom refuse. 5. Go to space. Simple enough. I use a coffee grinder to grind up 4 grams of the mush into the finest powder possible and dumped it in a small stainless steel pot with the exact amount of water needed for 1 cup of tea. Next I plopped in 2 bags of Tetley's Earl Grey vanilla to take me all the way to Flavor Town because magic mushrooms aren't known for their over-the-top delicious potential, known more for its earthy, kind of like literal speep taste except only drier. PSA: use pizza or peanut butter Sammy for ingesting large quantities of dry mush. Makes the experience less. Vomit on his sweater already. Apples help me to curb that initial nausea. I prep my cup with some cheesecloth and slowly pour the mushroom concoction through the cloth to collect the organic matter floating in the water. It literally smells like my vanilla tea. Added some honey and began to drink it. Holy peeping speep. It tastes just like my tea. There is almost no discernible taste difference. At this point it was about 10 a.m. The nice thing about regular mushrooms tasting like speep is the taste lingers, especially when you burp. So it is not easy to forget what choices you have just made. The tea was just tea until it most totally was not. When you eat mushrooms, they can take upwards on an hour to begin to kick in. Gives you time to situate yourself in a comfortable area, with comfy clothes, and get set up with an activity you can enjoy. This was my first time feeping with the tea, so other than other trip reports I have read, I did not know what to anticipate, so I anticipated nothing and just embraced the trip as it unfolded. This is the way to avoid a bad trip. Lean into it. Never fight against it. Literally 20 minutes later my Bison goes webby. Door frames and windows are no longer symmetrical. And colors are just, wow. The come up that usually takes 1 to 2 hours to climb crescendoed for me at an unheard of rate of speed. It was as though I was completely normal one moment, then a couple of deep breaths and deliberate blinks later the world around me took a new shape. It happened so fast I was shocked, and the shock threw me into a laughing fit which woke up my then roommate. A-Rod the body. A-Rod comes out and sees my writhing on the floor, crying laughing. He looks at the time on his phone and shakes his head. Apparently, I found this to be the funniest speep I have ever seen. Non-stop laughter until I laughed so hard I almost speep myself. Bathroom time. Hallucinogenics tend to make biological process very unpleasant experiences, as you are very aware of sensations you would normally want to numb for the sake of sanity. So I was not stoked about what I had to do. They'll spare you fine folks the speepy details, but the mushroom tea turned my stomach upside down and I pissed out of my ass for like 10 minutes. That was a completely new mushroom experience for me. Not one I ever want to relive. Yikes. Finishing the porcelain crucible, I returned to my comfy spot on the couch a changed man. I half-heartedly watched some TV, probably Family Guy as it is quality background noise, just following my fluid mind down the river of hallucinations. My phone rings. It's my boss lady. Boss lady, hey Milk, are you about ready to be picked up for that gallery at 5? I look at my phone. It's peeping 4. My perception of time was so skewed. It felt as though I had just left the washroom moments ago. Maybe I did speep. Me, yes, ready. Boss lady, you forgot about the shift tonight, didn't you? Me, I 100% did. Boss lady, well, we really do need your help tonight if you can still make it. Feeling bad about my terribly timed decisions while also feeling gratitude for the entire universe, I agreed to still work the shift and have her pick me up. I hang up the phone and immediately go to the bathroom to see how big my pupils are. Feeping massive. Excellent. One of the only upsides to mushroom tea is that the effects do not seem to last as long as ingesting the actual mushroom itself. 4 to 5 hours versus 8 to 10 hours depending on potency and quantity. So I was on the way down but still up. Still a way up. It's worth mentioning at this point that a week prior, I was in a physical altercation that left me with one black eye. 5 p.m. rolls around and boss lady texts me that she is here. I find my darkest, most reflective sunglasses, pray to the mushroom gods for guidance and venture out into the world for the first time that day. She knows about my black eye and almost immediately as I sit in her car she asks to see it. Fuck. Internally panicking. While externally pretending to be a cucumber I remove the glasses and she inspects my eyebrows. Boss lady, geez, they got you a good one, eh? And that was it. That's all she said. Shades back on. Headed to work. We arrive at the library to find a long line of geriatrics waiting to gain entry. This was an old-aged art show showcasing local elderly artists' work. I walk in and look around. Ooh, snacks. They have some wafer cookies and a pot of coffee on a central table in the middle of the room while the perimeter of the room is housing all of the paintings. It is a small room and the only reason security is there at all is to ensure no one comes in to use the library as the regular library area is closed for the show. But the door locks, so it's what they expected of us. I'm milling around eating cookies, drinking subpar coffee with probably way too much sugar in it, just observing the art. Surprisingly not feeling anxious at all. The art was very soothing for some reason. None of them were over the top good in terms of fine art. I mean way better than anything I could create, but not like magical masterpieces. Lots of farm landscapes, which I thought was strange. You can paint anything in your imagination and you paint a red barn and a field full of rolled up hay bales. But the more I looked and the more I questioned, the more I understood the why. This art was not for me. It wasn't for anyone other than the individual who created it from their unique ethos. This wasn't just a piece of art, it is a piece of their humanity, who they are as an individual among a sea of individuals. I grabbed a few more cookies. When I went to the cookie table I was greeted by a nice older woman whose actual name escapes me, but I wouldn't tell you degenerates anyway. I saw you looking at the art. What do you think? Unable to capture and articulately express the sensations I felt experiencing the art firsthand, I replied with a meek, "Yeah, it's good. That one you were looking at in the corner is mine." I felt a sense of her wanting to connect with someone regarding her art. She exuded confidence, but somehow I still sensed a bit of exhausted loneliness in her. "Really? It is pretty cool. What inspired you to create that piece?" She goes on to tell me how that was the farm her husband had grown up on, the farm where they had met. She said that ever since he died 5 years ago she felt lost, disconnected. She said she recently started having dreams of her late husband and the farm where they met, and it would make her depressed. "Then I don't know what happened," she said. "I just woke up one day and knew I had to paint the farm. So I did. I cannot explain it, but as soon as I was finished with the painting I felt lighter, like my husband was still with me somewhere." I could tell she was getting a little anxious divulging potentially sensitive personal information to a complete stranger. "It is a very beautiful work of art, and I'm sure your husband would be impressed by what you have created." She smiled, and we parted ways. Damn. Here I was, initially harshly judging this seemingly bleak piece of artwork that was actually a piece of someone's soul. I learned a lot about myself that day. About snap judgments in multiple perspectives. I hope that lady is happy doing whatever she's doing. We finish the day and get into the boss's car. She looks at me. Car still in park. "Boss lady, how high were you today?" Me, silence. "Boss lady, I'm not a peeping idiot." Me, I just smoked a bit of weed, I forgot about the shift. My apologies. She looked pretty pissed but was glad no one else noticed my suspected inebriation. I got written up, but she was a nice boss, so it never made it to head office, thankfully. Undefined. Edit 2. I get it, I've peeped up twice that day. I should have used lemon juice. Lol 3. TL. Doctor drank mushroom tea, then was reminded about a shift I picked up. Attended shift. Had perspective altering experience. Was almost fired but just got written up. Totally worth it. I wish my grandpa was growing mushrooms. Oh, he probably is. LMFAOO. Quality joke. Dude, you are an incredible writer. I felt like I went on that journey with you. I felt the speepty art vibe and magical transformation into guilt, thr, and appreciation. My butthole is dirty also, so I related with that as well. You went to work on 4 grams? You must be an absolute unit. The body mass affects the potency of the shrooms. Yeah dude, check out this calculator. Of course, mass isn't the be-all and end-all, but it still plays a pretty important role. Edit. This magic calculator should be used for working out average dosage, so use our dosage calculator as an estimate and do not use as definitive advice. Some users are more sensitive to psilocybin than others, so maybe start with a lower dosage if you aren't an experienced user. Please find a guide to help with your trip. Always use psychedelics responsibly. Stay safe, and have fun. Well, that is certainly handy. I have an opportunity to try for the first time coming up soon. Thanks for this. You're welcome. Remember, set and setting. I'm going to be with a handful of friends I have known since 3 to 7 years old that have all been experimenting with them for the last 2 years. We are going to our usual cabin that we rent every year for a getaway. And we have one guy staying sober to make sure we don't drown ourselves in the pool. I'm feeling real good about this. It sounds like you've done your due diligence. I hope you have yourself a groovy time. This seems like a win to me. Also, I would love to talk about altered perceptions of reality and realization of other people's creativity as a microcosm of their self. You articulated that really well and it was lovely. Have you done psychedelics before? If not and you're curious about such things as you wrote, I highly recommend it. This is of course assuming you're in the right state of mind/health. People with ailments such as schizophrenia can be much more prone to negative, adverse effects. What about anxiety/depression? I've done shrooms once and acid a few times. As someone with anxiety/depression, you definitely want to only try and do any psychedelics on a day where your head is in the right place. If you aren't in a good spot, it can go south pretty quickly. Having an experienced friend can help with that though. I also don't recommend acid if you tend to have pretty bad depression. I'm not sure what it is about it in particular, but whenever I'm coming down after a night on acid, it's like a dam that was holding back all my negative emotions broke and my depression hit me like a freight train. We tested it before and after to make sure we didn't get something else. But it was legit stuff. Not sure if that's a normal come down effect or not for people though. I know that with mushrooms I didn't have that at all, and it actually helped me get to a better place. It was a much more fun trip than acid for sure. Yep. I've always said to only take psychedelics when you have all your speep together. But then again, is there ever a time when we have all our speep together? The first time I took acid was at a time in my life when I was very depressed. I was definitely using drugs as an escape mechanism and letting several aspects of my life go to speep. The trip was great, but the come down was when reality and the negative emotions hit me like a truck. All my friends commented on how I seemed extremely shaken up. It was a good kick in the ass for me to get my life together. Though, if you're going to take psychedelics for the first time, do your research and take a small dose. Eroid is the best resource for drug information on the internet. I'd also second the recommendation for shrooms lol. When I was still a teenager living with my parents decades ago, I would only trip if my parents were out of town. Ideally across the country or out of the country. I wanted to know for sure that there was no chance I could run into them or they would call and tell me I needed to be home for some reason. It just felt better knowing they were thousands of miles away. Fortunately, they did a lot of traveling during my senior year of HS. This does remind me of my first acid trip. My parents were on vacation and all my siblings already lived on their own. I took first around 75 micrograms. After 30 minutes feeling nothing it took 37. 5 micrograms more and then the last quarter of the tab. Nothing happened, and I was rolling a joint with my friends when my older sister was suddenly in the backyard with her boyfriend. Note she didn't know anything of my drug use except weed and alcohol. She sees me rolling a joint, start laughing and ask if it is okay to just drink something and then immediately leave. I said yes and I was thinking to start smoking the joint, but decided against it. My sister leaves and I take 3 hits from the joint and the whole peeping world exploded in fractals and colors. It was insane. I went from sober to tripping in 5 minutes. To this day I am happy I waited with the joint till my sister left. Boss lady, how high were you today? Me, silence. Boss lady, I'm not a peeping idiot. LOL. I love that she didn't mention it until after the shift. Yay, she confronted him after the fact. Emo, she's probably a great boss and was looking out after him during the shift too. I actually wish we could get this same story from her perspective. He sat in the car, muttering to himself that he is calm as a cucumber, calm as a cucumber. I thought to myself, oh speep, he's high. I need to see his eyes to see what type of high he is, so I asked him to let me see his black eye. He forgot I already saw it and let me see his plate-sized pupils. This guy is tripping balls. I decide to let him enjoy the ride, not saying anything for the rest of the drive. Good thing it's old people. I'm not certain why he stared at that farm picture for 3 hours, but luckily no one actually needed security because this guy really had a connection to this painting. I bet you $1 this is what actually happened. I'd better see this. While this should have more upvotes, I haven't taken mushrooms in a few years now, but last time I did was before a high school trip with a bunch of kids to a camp lol. I know. What kind of kid goes to a camp on mushrooms? That's its own story. Anyways, I found myself packing my bags crying. Not sure what it meant, but ever since then I don't like leaving town, ha ha ha. LMW sounds like mushrooms. 1. Grind mushrooms. 1. Boil in water. 2. And sugar/honey for sweetness. 3. Strain out mushroom refuse. 4. Go to space. Just a heads up for the future. Don't add a tea bag. The caffeine can cause nausea and make your heart race. The shrooms are the tea. I add a splash of lemon at the beginning and a spoon of sugar at the end of the process. The lemon will help convert the active ingredient into moon juice for you. Good point about the caffeine, but non-caffeinated tea bags exist and mushroom tea on its own tastes pretty gross. Lemon and sugar tastes good. There are definitely some non-tea herbs that you could use like chamomile, ginger or peppermint. I literally have chamomile and peppermint for my stomach, and they are great for mushroom tea. Sadly our grow operation isn't going as good as it should. OSHT I did this too. Had a summer job in a fine dining restaurant, on a small island where rich people go on vacation. Ate some chocolate after lunch / before my shift. Definitely should have known that it was an edible based on who my roommate was at the time. I thought that it was just weed until I realized that I was no longer getting ready for work, but talking to myself in the mirror. Looked down at my hands, and the rug was bright blue and waving between my fingers. OSCK. It was only the second time that I tried shrooms, and I really didn't want to go to work, but I had no choice. I had to walk instead of drive, and the ground was bouncy. It was a beautiful day. Truly amazing that I actually got there, because I have zero sense of direction. Was a cool experience. Being in the kitchen and listening to the cooks tell stories about Brazil. Was not a cool experience. Being unable to carry a tray to the correct table, and the others had to do all of my work for me. They were annoyed, but also kind of loved it because I'm a teacher and appear to be really straight-laced. After work the boss called me into her office, and obviously I thought that I was about to lose my job. But she said I make edibles and I can give you a good recipe, but don't do this before work again. 1/10. Do not recommend this experience. But also 11/10, because this is one of my favorite stories about my life. 1/10 and 11/10. Sounds like great chocolate. Way to pull it together, man. Mushrooms can be a wild time. Great read and well written. I have found them to be very malleable. Like, if my brain knows it's in a safe place, the mushrooms will make my mind melt into oblivion, but if I'm outside and moderately alert, they tend to work with me. Even if it's only for a short period of time. Unfamiliar places breed curiosity and intrigue, while familiarity allows the mushrooms to do what they are best at. Both can have their place. Man, I can't wait until it's warm and I can do mushrooms again, lol. Great story. And yes, you definitely know good trip than forgetting your shift, lol. I knew a girl who was part of our friend's large theme camp at a festival. She downed an eighth of shrooms and proceeded to get drunk in the hot sun for an hour, pass out and woke incredibly burned. This was an outdoor camping event. She had been 2 years prior. Why she didn't use sunscreen, I'll never know. Poor girl was so lobster red and tripping balls miserable that she managed to hitch a ride home with some rando that afternoon of the event culmination, which is celebrated with a giant sculpture burning. So she essentially had an awful trip, a terrible hangover, a painful few days recovery, and wasted hundreds on an event she was at no longer than a day. But, pretty sure everyone who has done hallucinogens has a bad trip story, lol. A festival in the hot sun which culminates in burning a giant sculpture and everyone's on drugs. Man, which festival could that possibly be? With all those hints, I'm guessing the Polar Bear Festival. For sure. Did almost the same thing many years ago. I had made some mushroom tea, but I added Kool-Aid and sugar instead to make it taste better. Decided to wait to take it. Ended up going out with my roommate and getting hammered drunk. Wake up the next morning and have to get ready for work. I was thirsty. I saw Kool-Aid. Finished a whole cup before I realized what I had done. Working the line during a busy lunch rush, tripping your face off is not a good time. Really enjoyable post. Ike, if it's the mushrooms in your story or the way you explain things or even both, but I felt it in my soul. Never had anything similar to this. Hope you have a wonderful day, BTW. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Wish you a wonderful day as well, friendly stranger. Reminds me of a time my coworkers had some LSD. One showed up to his bar shift the next day, got halfway up the front steps, stopped, turned around and said to the two mangers and doormen, "Listen, Paul, you should know I took some LSD last night and I still haven't come down." The doormen laughed. The managers looked at each other. And Jerry said, "Well, at least he was honest. My buddy got sent home." Paul wanted to sack him, but Jerry the Lion King stood by his staff. Lion King was probs the best manager I've ever known. Anyway, true story. That bar was good crack. Psilocybin breaks down at high temperatures. Don't boil mushrooms to make tea. Instead, grind them up and put them in lemon juice. The acid in the lemon will extract the psilocybin and turn it a dark blue/brown color. Then you can add that to whatever drink you want. I could not believe how far down I had to go for this. Grind mushrooms and add in an acidic drink like orange juice or lemon juice. They can handle small amounts of heat, but hard boils will break down a lot. Just grind and propionate an acidic juice for a bit and drink and eat all those chunks. Honestly, if you give it 30 minutes at least of soaking in the acid, then you don't need to eat the chunks. In fact, you shouldn't. The whole reason of making a tea is to avoid having to actually eat the mushrooms. Mushrooms are made from chitin, which is the same material that insects use for their exoskeletons. Chitin doesn't digest and causes some stomach issues. But yes, hard boiling is really bad for psilocybin. Anytime I hear people saying they have to take more than 3 grams to feel mushrooms, I think they either are getting old sport out mushrooms or they are boiling them. Reading this as a psychonaut myself, I can feel and imagine every bit. This speep used to scare me. I was working media relations during some of my tripping days. So, if a news story broke at any odd hour, I'd need to be putting people in front of cameras with talking points I had quickly written. When I wanted to trip, I'd claim I was out of town primitive camping without cell phones. I'm sure my colleagues were like, "He's got shrooms again, lol." They all knew I was growing them. I gave them away as birthday presents, lol. I need better coworkers. When I initially set up my operation, I overproduced way too much. Sold enough to cover my costs and then decided the rest should be given away. So occasionally I'd stop by a friend's house with a gallon-sized bag of shrooms, wink, and tell them to have a fun party. I couldn't keep frozen food because my freezer was jam-packed with them. Eventually my husband pointed out the 5-year prison sentence attached to such frivolities, and it was no more. God, I miss being 25. That's peeping awesome, haha. When someone rolls through with psychs, especially for free, it's such a pleasant surprise. I bet when they saw the bag their eyes lit up just as big as if they'd been on the shrooms themselves. Yeah, I might get a bit paranoid if I had all that lying around and if I had already given out so many of them, lol.